So before we can start animating our shot, we just have to dial down the subsurf for all the meshes that we have in our scene, since otherwise the 3D view wouldn't play back fast enough. This way I just copy all the attributes, so now subsurf should be down on all the parts of the mesh. Testing with playback, Alt A. Now I can select my armature and add a new action to it. Just making sure that subsurf is down everywhere. For animating, it's best if you have a different UI setup. In this case I had an animation setup prepared already, but I figured I'd rather have a horizontal layout. So here I'm just creating an empty action and testing all the different views, but yeah, I think it was easier for me to animate in this view. I just split it horizontally and turn the top one into an action editor. That way I could have as many keys as possible in my 3D view. Otherwise that would have been too small. Right, now testing and inserting keys for all the bones that I'm going to animate, because that's important for our auto recording that we're going to use later on. Because we're only going to key what we have keyed already, using this option here, available and needed. Now I set up a timeline and press the record button. Now everything is going to be keyed that has a key already, so we don't accidentally set on keys for cameras or lights. Here again I'm just testing the formations, and I noticed that I haven't weight painted it well enough, but well, that was easy to fix. I'll just select it, pull it away a little bit to see how it's deforming, and then can just go to weight paint mode and select that bone and just paint the weight on that I need. Since I made a duplicate of my original model, I would obviously have to do that later on too, again. But yeah, I didn't really think of that. Okay, now everything seems to work well, so just started posing my first pose, which is, I looked at a lot of reference. There's a great website called BBC Motion Gallery, which has a lot of animal footage, and there are many shots of lions and tigers running in slow motion, so I figured that would be a great reference for that. So I loosely based my walk on that, and I also did some tests with myself crawling on the floor. So yeah, that's just what I'm starting from. So notice that I'm still keying on the first frame, and that's just my preferred way of working. I can key every 10 frames, and that way I can switch back and forth between my main key poses just by using the up and down arrow on the keyboard. So I'm still tweaking my first key pose. Just clear the rotation and location so I can set them exactly on the floor. Obviously that will require a lot of tweaking later on too, but that's just a rough pass for now. So here I have my first 3 key poses already. I'm keying on frame number 1 and frame 11 and 20. Well, actually, that should be 21. That was a weird mistake. But anyway, the idea is that I can switch back and forth between those key poses just easily by with the keyboard. I also noticed that I'm scrubbing a lot at this stage already. Scrubbing is quite cool. It's quite cool option in Blender for scrubbing. You can hold down your Alt key and rotate your mouse wheel, and that will just scrub through the animation. That's what I'm using quite a lot. It's really useful. So you see, I'm getting through those poses quite fast. Just roughing out the main basic idea of this walk. So first he's just gonna come out of a jump down on the floor, and then jump back off again. That's all. Not really worrying about timing so much at this stage, because it's all just key poses. I'm just refining all the key poses and then doing the timing as a last pass. That way I have maximum control over how my action looks like. You can also see that I'm using for rotating, that I'm using the manipulators quite a lot. I don't really like them using that much for things like positioning objects in a 3D view. For that, it's easier to just use the keyboard. But for armatures, it's quite useful to, for example, for the rotation manipulator, to switch it to normal orientation. So that way I can just rotate each bone pretty easily, and I always know where the bone points. So that's just a really quick way of posing a character. Oh yeah, I'm going quite back and forth quite a lot here. That's just to see how my action flows and how the arcs work. Especially when you're posing, when you're doing the initial posing setup, you can refine your arcs quite a bit just by putting in key poses and then just adding more poses. That way your focus is not so much on timing, but more on what happens on the screen. And, well, yeah, obviously for this shot it wasn't that important, the timing, because it was a slow motion shot, and, well, looking back at it, it's pretty stiff, so I could have done a much better job, but I think for the time given, it went quite okay. Now pushing up the hands and feet. Fingers I'm always doing as a last pass because, well, they're quite tricky, and their fingers are have more follow through than the rest of the limbs, so it's very important how the fingers follow the action of the character. So I always do that last. Here I'm using quite useful feature which is not quite sure what I'm doing here, actually. It's been too long. I think I put my camera in the wrong position there. My god, yeah. Well, I still had that empty there, so weird. Okay, well, here I'm just animating the camera roughly, because this action is very much just made for the camera. So after the first blocking of the action, I can already start animating the camera roughly, so I get an idea of the final shot. Here I discovered a jerk in the motion, so I had to delete some keys. Yeah, I was quite out of practice at that point, so I really had to take a lot of time posing everything and going back and forth and changing things, and yeah, I'm trying out a lot of things here. Yeah, so this is a really cheesy trailer shot, so I figured let's just have the creature go and try to eat the camera or something. I don't know. I think also try to grab the camera. Yeah, with these kind of animal runs, it's extremely important to know how the spine is moving, and the shoulders are also extremely important. Also for the weight, how fast the shoulders go down, how the elbow joints react to the character hitting the ground, for example. Wow, that's a weird jump. I think I'm going to adjust that later on, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, at this point, I think I stopped putting any effort into making the motion believable. I just tried to make it work for the camera, because it was just meant to be a quick shot, but a very exciting one at that. Yeah, now it's starting to look better. Just try to give the head a bit more weight here, especially when it comes up. Also jumping back and forth between just the armature view or just the character to get an idea of the movement, and sometimes the playback was just faster just in armature view. And that is just basically a local view of the armature without character or anything like that. Usually I just move the armature in the layer below the character, where all the character models are. It's just a nice way to remember these kind of things, especially if you have more than one character in the shot or a background. Okay, now I'm starting to refine my camera animation, because camera animation is very important for me. It's practically half the shot, how believable your camera works and how much weight there is, camera shake, and all this kind of stuff is very important to me, because it makes your shot believable. It gives it some, well, you cannot say some grip in the real world, but yeah, it makes it more believable and more realistic. So, for example, in this shot, I was theorizing that it would be a dolly shot, so the camera would be mounted on a dolly and would be fairly rigid, but there's still some horizontal motion. So that's why I'm inserting some keys here on rotation Z, just by control clicking, shaking it up a little bit. I think I made a mistake there. Yeah, delete that one. Yeah, that's shaking quite a bit. So I just delete some keys. Here again, it's very important to play back and forth to see how it actually works. It's also good if you animate the camera to know what kind of camera motion you're trying to mimic. In this case, like I said, it's a long crane / dolly shot, so in a slow motion shot it wouldn't be that shaky. But it adds to the excitement of the shot. Also playing back without character just to see the camera motion, it's also quite helpful. And again, I have to go back and tweak my character action to make it fit to the camera, but also just to give it more weight. As I said, I was struggling a lot with the weight of this shot. Here I'm trying to open the mouth a bit earlier, but I didn't want to give away too much, so I just made it open the mouth in the last frames. And now I'm tweaking hands, so that means I'm almost finished animating. Just making sure that the fingers flow well enough, especially when the hand touches the ground or when our weight gets shifted on the arm. I'm not quite happy with the finger rigs that I did. I think could have done well, anyone else could have done a better job at that. It's really not that, wasn't really that helpful. So yeah, you can see that flipping happening there. I basically had to tweak a lot and do a lot of manual work with this kind of setup. It was also extremely hard that way to bend the fingers back, for example. Well, good thing that's just not a rigging tutorial. Here, now that is a really useful feature, the view locking found in the view properties. That way you can just basically plug your camera into any object that you have in your 3D viewport. So in this case, I'm snapping my camera to the middle control of the hand, so it's always in the center of the view, which is really helpful, especially if you're animating something like a walk, because then you don't have to worry about shifting your view constantly, or when you're playing back you see just what you're trying to animate. And I disable it again. Now this is just endless looping back. Just to see how the weight is behaving. I mean, if you're doing this kind of stuff a lot, then you get an idea of how things should move or shouldn't move. And sometimes, if you're lucky, well, in my case, if I'm lucky, I can capture what I'm trying to, what I'm seeing or what I'm trying to achieve. Most cases, though, like in this one, it's not really, didn't really go that well. But yeah. And a very cheesy grabbing action. Okay, now that I have all my key poses, or, well, I already did some in-betweening for that one, I can start shifting keyframes around and inserting different keys and changing things. That's just really as a last pass. Usually this process takes, well, a couple of days, or weeks, or months even. I know people who do nothing more than on a project and just animating 1 minute of film, which is quite a lot. I mean, yeah. To make something that's less sloppy than this, you probably need more time. Okay, now that's starting to look quite okay. Just some issues with the elbow joints and the knee joints here. Get quite some intersections there, but figured if you don't see it in the camera, it's not that bad. And again, the spine is very important. Really, just if you want to animate this kind of stuff, go to BBC Motion Gallery and just check out the animal motions or watch any kind of documentary. It's really, really helpful for reference. Yeah, now I'm really trying to push the weight on the down motion here, especially when it touches the ground and comes back up. The head is not immediately going up into the air. It takes some time because it's really heavy. And the shoulders really bent down. Here I'm just pulling the elbow joint out. I have to key quite a lot to just get the motion flow as nice as possible there. And again, by pulling out the elbows, I just wanted to emphasize the weight that is carried over these arms. And of course the inevitable tongue animation, which is quite fun to do. Okay, now I can go back to my camera. Basically, the location keys are all on vector, so the movement of the camera is just one continuous path, while the rotation, which has a lot more keys in it, is just automatic handle interpolation. So that way I can quickly insert keys, and the rotation movement of the camera is much more fluid that way. Here again, it helps sometimes to go out of camera view and see where the camera is in relation to your character. Still haven't quite gotten the feet to work, but yeah. I think compositing can hide everything. Alright, that looks better. Okay, that's it. Here again, I'm just testing the formations, and I noticed that I haven't weight painted it well enough. But well, that was easy to fix. I'll just select it, pull it away a little bit to see how it's deforming, and then can just go to weight paint mode and select that bone and just paint the weight on it, because that's important for our auto recording that we're going to use later on, because we're only going to key what we have keyed already using this option here, available and needed. Now I set up a timeline and press the record button. Now everything is going to be keyed that has a key already, so we don't accidentally set on keys for cameras or lights. So before we can start animating our shot, we just have to dial down the subsurf for all the meshes that we have in our scene, since otherwise the 3D view wouldn't play back fast enough. This way I just copy all the attributes, so now subsurf should be down on all the parts of the mesh. Testing with playback, Alt A. Now I can select my armature and add a new action to it. Just making sure that subsurf is down everywhere. For animating, it's best if you have a different UI setup. In this case, I had an animation setup prepared already, but I figured I'd rather have a horizontal layout. So here I'm just creating an empty action and testing all the different views, but yeah, I think it was easier for me to animate in this view. I just split it horizontally and turn the top one into an action editor. That way I could have as many keys as possible in my 3D view. Otherwise that would have been too small. Right, now testing and inserting keys for all the bones that I'm going to animate.